we will do away with the labels and we will just call them children. We will call them humans. But for now, I think it is important to have labels, because if we don't label them, people will. They're already being labelled. They're being labelled dyslexic, autistic, disruptive, troublesome, ADHD, ADD, problem children. And I think that if we don't create a different kind of label for them, then mainstream society will. When Joshua was about 3, we'd just arrived in New Zealand and we were on a bit of a road trip around, looking around the country. He and I were driving around one day. I think we were looking for a beach to go skip stones on or something, and we were just quiet. I was sort of drifting along, not really saying anything, and all of a sudden, just out of the blue, Joshy said, "Hey, Dad, who was Michelangelo?" And I just kind of thought about it for a sec. I said, "Well, he was an artist, buddy." And he thought about it for a minute, and he said, "Oh yeah. He painted the sky, didn't he?" And I thought about it for a second. I said, well, yeah, he did. He painted the sky in big churches and things. And he said, I said, why? He said, I said, why? Did you know him or something? And he said, yeah, I knew him. He was a good man. And that, of course, sparked my interest even more. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about that, Joshy. What do you mean? And he goes, Dad, that was a long time ago. And that was pretty much the end of that conversation.
There's all some, quote, indigo children on the planet. Always, since the beginning of time. It's just that what's happening now is that there's masses of children being born who are, in fact, enlightened.
The last time the indigos were incarnate on the planet in the numbers they are now was probably in the 12th, 13th centuries. And they were known at that time as the Gnostics, as the Cathars, as the Bogomils, the heterodox Christians. In other words, the heretics.
Some early examples are Joan of Arc and also Bernadette Soubirous, also known as Saint Bernadette. These were strong-willed, very tuned-in young people who changed the world. Here you have, on the one hand, these kids that are incredibly gifted. Some were remembering their lives before they were even born, before they were even in utero. There were so many stories I was hearing of one child who actually told her mummy that before she was born, before she was even in her mummy's tummy, she used to watch her mummy. And she actually described several things that her mother had done, so that her mother knew that she was telling the truth, because how could the child know? And she was waiting for the moment to come in, and she said, I chose you. I chose to come into your tummy.
My kids and I were making Valentines for their classroom, and my Leia was sitting on my lap, and my 2 oldest children were at the kitchen table with us, and my Leia was just looking up into my eyes, and then all of a sudden she noticed her reflection, and she says, wow, Mama, I can see myself in your eyes. And I said, yes, honey, I can see myself in your eyes. I said, isn't that beautiful? We can see ourselves in each other. And she smiled. She said, yes, just like I was Grandma Marlene. And I then said, well, tell me a little bit about that. And she said, well, my body got very sick. I was very, very sick. And she said, and the doctors tried to help me, but my body was way too sick. So she said, my body died. And she said, and then my body got colder and colder and colder. And when she said this, there was such an intensity to which she said it. And her body, my mother's body, was put on ice for 3 days. So then my Leia says, and then the 2 men came to the house, which 2 men did. And she said, and they put my body into a box, which they indeed did. And then they took my body to a place that had a big oven. And she said, and my body was burnt. And she said, and my spirit went up with the angels. She said, but I wasn't an angel. I just was with the angels watching you guys, watching all of you. She said, and then I was a baby, and now I'm my Leia. She seems to be overcome by the clarity of her experience. She then says, I'm scared. And I just know intuitively that I need to sing this song, although it's not something I commonly sing to my kids. I started singing He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. And Angelina also joined me, and within a few words of the song, my Leia then grabs my cheeks fiercely and looks me right in the eyes and says, that was the song. And when she said that, I had instant memory of the song that my mother actually wrote into her will to be sung on the boat when we were pouring her ashes into the Atlantic Ocean. She wanted all her family members, all ages, all different belief systems, to all have absolute knowing, as she did, that regardless of the outcome of her physical healing, whether she had it or not, that her soul was infinitely in God's hands, and she trusted in that impeccably. And when I sang that song to her, she smiled, because that truly gave her comfort in that moment. That was the song that was her keynote to remind her of her soul being in God's hands.
You, my Leia. In His hands, He's got you, my Leia. In His hands, He's got you, my Leia. In His hands, He's got the whole world in His hands.
There are some indigos who are streaming into the planet to bring the sword, of will, the sword of power, to cut through the old paradigm and slice through the illusion. There are some who are bringing in the gentle compassion. There are some who are bringing in the new language of light and sound. So that's where the music comes in. That's where the heart communications come in. And if we can quiet our minds enough, we find that clear communication can come through on a heart level. Has everyone here heard of indigo children and have an idea in your own minds of what that means, basically?
Yeah, I read a little bit about it, and what I observed in my own little one is being very sensitive. Normal. Children are sensitive, but there's an extra edge to it. The memory of past lives bleeds through more readily, and she doesn't always know what to do with it, but it's just below the surface. A knowingness, as all children do, of what's authentic and what's not, but they seem to be more impatient with that which is not authentic, which sometimes leads them into to clashes. And helping a master awaken type of role rather than trying to fill an empty brain. Education.
We have to have receptivity for it first. We have to have a receiver, like a radio, like a crystal receiver inside of ourselves. And that comes with doing the work and clearing out the darkness and the old patterns of doubt, and fear and all the patterns that we've been installed with. Once we get our receiver uncovered, though, we can tune that dial in to the indigo vibration. And it's a very incredible process, and to see this happening all over the planet, in these little pockets, but more and more it's becoming a web. Here? Indigos are here to bridge heaven and earth.
Indigo children have access to human experience at a larger level, at a greater depth than most people do. They access the data in a different way, the incoming data of life. And they access data that some people don't have access to at all. And so sometimes indigo children are mistaken or misunderstood to be children with attention deficit disorder or children with some sort of deficit of some kind or another. And in fact, it isn't that they have a deficit, but they have a supplement. They have more,
If we have
less.
our indigo children mask their spiritual gifts with substances like Ritalin, or fast food that's being sold on school campuses for lunch, then we are literally shackling these children. We're putting them into chemical straitjackets.
When you're trying to put them in a curriculum in a school system where they have to learn a little bit about everything kind of in a spiral as they're growing, that doesn't work for them because they want to take a subject, grab onto it, sink their teeth in, and go until they've gotten to a point where they're finished with that subject, Then they come back and grab another one.
A lot of these kids really need to be in private school or home tutored. So unfortunately, when you're in groups of 20, 30, 40 kids, you have to behave. You have to be able to sit there for an hour, 45 minutes, 55 minutes. And for many of them, that's just asking too much.
In my life, I've been diagnosed bipolar, manic depressive, schizophrenic, psychotic. But I had one doctor who, after I had my, quote, breakdown, tried to jump off some buildings and whatnot, he said to me, Miss Kirkland, they're going to probably tell you never to be an actress again, that you're too emotional, you're too this, you're too that. He said, don't listen to them. He said, in Asia, in my country, you would be considered an artist, but in your country, you're labeled. You're, because you're too creative, you're too artistic, you're considered crazy.
These kids are being, if you want to say it, sort of tripped into this hyperactivity. It's because they're getting junk food, they're getting, often they're precipitated by having mercury in their environment, mercury in fish, mercury from cogen plants. Some of the older ones have had it filled into their teeth. And then also there's the fact that the younger ones are getting it actually through vaccinations. A lot of these young children will be quite normal, and, well, what we call normal, until they're tripped into having vaccinations, repeated vaccinations throughout childhood with thimerosal, which is a mercury-based preservative.
I can't imagine any kind of artificial substance or pharmaceutical or drug that you could put into the body of a child that could substitute for or provide you with more profound or deeper impact than love, caring, compassion, and acceptance.
You know, a lot of indigos are labeled ADHD, which the medical community will tell you stands for attention deficit with hyperactivity disorder. But I think that ADHD stands for attention dialed into a higher dimension.
What we're going to talk about today is an osteopathic approach to children with ADD, ADHD, and autism. We're really going to talk about individual care a little bit and about the full spectrum of options. We have things all the way from, dealing with just drugging them and using Ritalin or Adderall or any of the other medications that are out there. We have the choices of doing absolutely nothing and using alternative medicine, whether it happens to be herbs or homeopathy. You have the full spectrum, and even osteopathic manipulative medicine, because it definitely makes a difference in these kids. So do we say that we have to be on one spectrum or the other, or do we have the benefit of being able to use a full spectrum of things that are available to us as what's appropriate for that individual child? Being different's not a bad thing. It's just different. And the key thing is finding people who understand you, who respect you, and allow you to be the individual that you are. That's the most important thing, and recognizing you may not always be the popular kid or the one that everybody gets along with, and that's okay. What is normal? That is one of those words where we use it so often. What is normal? And that's different from every physician you talk to, every parent you talk to, every individual you talk to. So we have a hard time when we say, well, this kid's not normal. Well, what is your classification of normal, right? So as we start to approach these children, the things that I'm finding universally are that they're often very, very bright. Have you guys seen the same thing? Absolutely. Right. Some of the smartest kids you've ever seen. Anyone who's gifted and talented and has a passion for the world and a passion for making everything a better place, what an amazing, amazing thing that we want to actually continue to help promote these kids in feeling that it's okay to feel maybe that they're special. I think everybody's special. And when you recognize that whatever their special thing is, to help them further it so that they have a chance to blossom and become the most amazing individual, most amazing human being that they can be, that benefits the entire world in a positive way, then fine, use the label indigo. Makes no difference to me. But recognize that every child needs to have that love and that compassion and that patience to help them really expand to be the most incredible human being they can be.